And by the way, fun is also a way of creating empathy with people. Black humor is actually really, really functional in a lot of ways. It's like I had a really dear friend of mine who died of cancer, and what he used to say all the time would be, he had cancer, he was terminally ill. And so we would go together some places, and so it was, especially in places like this, people knew who he was. We'd walk through, and I'd move people and say, "Dead man walking." Dead man. And everyone was horrified, but he'd be laughing. Isn't that so? Because it was happening. There was nothing we could do about it, except, when especially got really sick, he used to say, he'd be in bed and look at me, "At least I got my health." Because otherwise, you're tearing your lapel and you're doing awful. And people are funny. So the people that we help. Everybody, any questions? Any other things? Questions? Comments? That framework is really. So I'm going to run through. By the way, when are we supposed to take a break?
About half an hour, 45 minutes.
Half an hour. So how late do we go?
Till 4:30.
4:30. So 2 hours. Let's go to 3 and take a short break. And then somewhere in there, I'll take another break because it's the afternoon and it's getting calm in this room, and you're all going to start falling asleep. Some of you have already fallen asleep. Wake up! So is that reasonable? Because I'm talking fast, and it's hard to follow.
Half an hour more. Is that right?
Half an hour more. If that's okay. Can you arrange that with the? Good. All right. So within this framework, we spend a lot of time reminding everybody about these basic premises, basic principles about the people we help, because the more we humanize people, the more likely it is we're going to be successful. So, we're just like you and me. We want to be treated with dignity and respect. We are angered when you're supposed to be working with me and your attention is elsewhere. I only get so much of your time, so I don't want to hear. One of the rules that we have is that the godforsaken smartphones cannot be anywhere near you when you're working with a person. Can't be done. Because as soon as you do that, anybody familiar with the literature on it? Just knowing it's there changes your attention. There was actually a really interesting study where they just put cell phones face up on a table with a group of people, and then they put cell phones face down on the table. And guess what they found? The people whose cell phones were face down had worse attention than the people who were face up. Because face up, at least they could face down, they couldn't. So the idea that this crazy little object is causing you to not be fully committed to the person whose life you're supposed to be helping is not acceptable. It's disrespectful. So we want to be treated with dignity. We have strengths and weaknesses, and we don't like it when you focus on disability, on weaknesses, and on needs. What is a care plan? A care plan is a list of everything you can't do. You need to increase this, you need to do this, you need to reduce that. No. That's, again, a recipe for disaster. It's hard to make goals and stick with them, not even from time to time, most of the time. If you came to this never having made goals. So there's a guy that worked with one of my favorite people ever. He was talking about, like, people talk about his goals and his goals and his goals, and he's like, goals? Fuck you. I've never made a goal. He said, here's what my goal in life were. To get to the next woman, to get to the next high, to get to the next woman, to get to the next high. And you want me to talk about what I want to do in a year? From the time he was a little kid, he lived at the end of his nose. Making a goal is hard. Making a goal is high. By the way, making choices is one of those things that is hierarchical. Choice making is one of those things you have to do. You have to start here and move your way up. So when you ask somebody to make a choice and they've never made a choice in their life or make a goal, set them up for a disaster. They're often confused and misunderstood and misconstrue intentions, have memory limitations that make it hard to stay on track. They're impulsive and act without thinking, want to be left alone at times and get crazy when they can't be. Part of our job is to get out of the way. And so often what happens is we're saying, no. So, Terrence, is anybody that familiar with the guy with prostitutes? Anybody heard that story? You don't count this. Okay, guy named Terrence in New York City. Living in an apartment supported, was at night physically assaulting his staff and eloping, as they say. So he's absconding. I like that. That's very Australian. We don't say abscond. So he was absconding. And so he's doing this stuff. He's hurting people. He's absconding. So the team all gets together, and what do they say? What do they say? What does the team say? Come on, you know this. We have to have more staff. We have to have this behavior plan. He's got to stop hitting people. If he doesn't, he's going to have to go into a more restricted placement. And, we can't handle this. We can't have this because he's dangerous. He's a risk to his health and safety. Sounds reasonable, right? So I'm sitting there and they asked us to come down and so so Terrence, what's the deal? And we have this conversation. And finally this and he goes, Tim, can I have a conversation with you without anybody else around? And usually that's like, ooh. So we go in the other room and he says, look, here's the deal. You're a guy, you get it. I'm ugly and I'm an asshole. And I'm like, check. And he said, I go get prostitutes. I can't tell them I get prostitutes because they would say I can't. And when I try to leave, they say I can't leave because I have to have 24-hour supports because of my severe behavior problem. He goes, I go down, I get laid, and then I come back. So he's like, so what can I do? And I'm like, let's have a conversation. So we sit down and we say, so I'm sitting with him and I'm talking to the rest of the team, and I said to him, well, he wants to, Terrence said he agrees I'll talk for him. And I said, Terrence gave me some confidential information he feels that he's comfortable with me sharing, and that is he goes down in Hell's Kitchen and he gets prostituted, and that's what he wants to do. And the team's like, oh no, that's illegal. We can't support that. So I'm like, why? So now the clinical director says absolutely not, and it goes to the point to the executive director, so the CEO of the organization. And she says, am I hearing you right? You think it's okay for him to get a prostitute? And I'm like, I didn't say it's okay, but here's a theory that if he goes and gets his prostitute, that he'll be less problematic. And she's like, can't do this. So then we finally come to a compromise, which is, okay, I only want to know he's safe. So we have to travel train with him. Who do they volunteer? Me. So we get on the number 1 train, we go down into Hell's Kitchen and go up, and then he's got 2 women that he goes to, and one of them's there, and we're walking up, and there I am, walking with him. And she's like, so, Terry is what they call me. I see you brought a friend. I work with Terry, I'm a psychologist. And she's like, honey, you can be anything you want to be. I'm like, I just want to make sure, and also that kind of stuff. And he goes, she's like, listen to me, asshole, money is time, so I have to take 20 hours. So, I paid her $20. So for her not to have sex with me, that's exactly right. I pay her $20, and of course at that, I'm like, because of course that's going to be when the cops come. We give her the $20 and stuff, and so she has this 5-minute conversation about he always wears a condom, he always goes to this person. In fact, while I was having the conversation with her, he was with the other person having a business transaction. It's important. He doesn't. And she said he's a good John, and he pays on time. I don't have any problem with him. He comes down, he does the stuff, he leaves. Travel train. Come back. Check. So what did we do? Rather than give him more staff, we took the staff away. No problem. No problem.
But you have to have a relationship. You have to somehow engender some trust for him to tell you that in the first place.
Yes, you have to have a relationship wherein, but I'll go back to this because I know you guys just love seeing this. I know you can't wait to see more of this. But that's exactly the point, which is what's important to you. You come with this idea that I'm not here to make any judgment about your use of prostitutes. Now, I've had guys who have said, I want to smoke weed, and I say, I can't help you with that because it's illegal. Or I've had guys saying, all I want is to drink a little bit, and I get a little bit squirrely about that, and I'm like, I'm not going to help you go get beer, because it's beer and brain injury don't go together. Now, I know if I'm not here, you're going to do that stuff. We just have to agree that I can't help you with that, but even that's honest. But it's also respectful. I'm not saying, Let me tell you about beer. You know you're not, because that's what people hear all the time. You know, we wrote an article, it's called Reflections on Dobermans, Poodles, and Social Rehabilitation. And the problem is, we try to turn Dobermans into poodles. And the relationship comes when I say, you're a Doberman. And you're going to be forever a Doberman. And I'm okay with that. So let's figure out how we can make sure that you can hook up with poodles every once in a while. Well, let's make sure you're not a Doberman that bites somebody, because when that happens, they're going to put you to sleep. So again, the idea is, yeah, but it's inherent, which is this framework has there is no value except when the person says, this is what I value in our outcome. We can't come to it with our own value. Like Terrence going to get a prostitute, I was like, oh my God, that is like, ooh. But that's his life, not mine. And he was right. And he said, before I had my brain injury, I had to pay for it. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I got you. And I think that even that conversation is, yeah, okay, I got you. And that's the point. So again, how are we framing it in such a way that we are being respectful of people, and we recognize that we're doing things in such a way that we demonstrate dignity and respect? And that, you know what? Again, you all know incredibly smart, incredibly technically gifted people who suck at working with people with behavior problems. And they can tell you exactly why they think this is the case because of the site of their injury. They can give you a behavior plan or an intervention strategy that is technically brilliant, that will be completely ineffective. But you'll see the guy, I always say bowling because we have a couple of guys that are part of bowling leagues now. And what's happened is the bowling league has actually become like an intervention spot for other people because the guys like this one guy and he says, I got some friends. So we got 3 guys who have serious anger problems with bowling balls. Right on the face of it, you go, oh my God, you know, they hurl things at you. Not once. Not once. We talked to the president, we talked to the treasurer. I went and bowled. I'm terrible at bowling. But it was like the bowling guy saw that this big doofusy guy who can't bowl was trying to help their friend. That's something. Then all they did was they all drink beer and made fun of me for 3 games. And the guys would laugh and they'd do this kind of stuff. The first guy, and then they were like, and then he said, you know, I've got, so it's John, Harry, and Todd. John was the first guy, and then Harry went, because Harry had nothing to do at night, and he's really bored and stuff like that, and he'd go bowling. And he's worse than I am. But I'll go, and they make fun of me all the time. Harry goes, and he rolls a 29, and they're like, new personal record, you are a star. Why? Because they have dignity. They recognize that he's trying as well as he can. By the way, they also bust his balls. Because if they didn't, I would be like, I don't know if we should do this. Because then you're just a mascot that people pat on the head. It's like in the United States, there's a whole group of people with disabilities who hate Special Olympics because it's like Gimps on parole, Gimps on parade. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's well-intentioned people, but that's part of the reality. And one of the things he said, you have to treat them like you treat everybody else. And they're like, oh, that's good. Like Harry falls on the ground, he has like, you know, he's got, you know, left side impairment, and they're like, you fell on your ass, you big fat ass. Right? And you can go, oh. Even service workers go, oh my goodness, he's going to feel terrible. And what does he do? He rolls over and goes, yeah, I'm a beach whale, I'm a beach whale. And it was a classic. So he falls on his ass, he rolls over a beach whale, and the guy says, somebody get a fucking harpoon! I mean, it's just going, just nasty. And he's on the floor, and everybody's laughing their ass off. Because it's not about, it's like you as a person, and we're having fun, and we're enjoying each other's company. And it doesn't matter all these kind of things. What matters is you have a life that you want to do. You're disconnected, let's get you connected. You don't have insight, okay. Let's try to get you connected to things that are important and meaningful to you. That's going to increase the probability of your insight. They appear to be in control, but they're not. Many people look like they're in control, and they're not. They're right on the edge of it.
How then do you
counter the argument that diminished capacity means it's more your responsibility than looking after their dignity?
How do you counter the argument that it's the diminished capacity that you have to pay attention to and that you have to sort of manage the reality of their inability to do things?
Because then suddenly the argument leaves the domain of this is everybody, not everybody. A lot of people go down and find a prostitute that's illegal. The argument then becomes they have diminished capacity. You should know what to do to prevent them from...
Sure. Well, I mean, the simple answer to that is pretty straightforward. If somebody's adjudicated incompetent and they have a guardian, I've actually had situations where I've gone to the guardian and said, "Are you okay?" And then it's done. If they are not adjudicated incompetent and nobody has made a competency determination, then the assumption is that they are competent. Fuck you.
What happens when the guardian says they're not going?
Oh, I've had it where the guardian said they're not going, and we'll say, "Okay, let's figure it out, and let's have a conversation." And we've had it where the guardian said they're not going, and they don't go. And you know, guess what?
But then they're still absconding, and you've still got the team saying we need more care and we need...
Oh, absolutely. So I mean, we had that exact situation happen. So a guardian just said no, and then the guy keeps taking off, right? So what would be the typical conversation? The typical conversation is, "Oh my God, we probably shouldn't have him in the community because he keeps leaving, and we have to manage this kind of stuff." And he'd go out, and he wouldn't just get a prostitute; he'd go out and get beer and all that other kind of stuff. And we would talk to the guardian, like, if we can let's not make it pathological, let's make it normal, and let's not pathologize things. And you have a theory, and the theory is he can't. We have a theory that maybe he can. Can we try it out? Nope, absolutely not. No, you cannot. That is my son, and he cannot do it. Okay? So let's have a conversation with your son about having a conversation with you. And the team is saying we're not going to do it, and they do it, and it's terrible, and you know what we do? We go to the guy and say, "This sucks. This sucks."
So you advocate that we should continue this on a case-by-case basis. Do you feel there's anything that you can do at a broader legislative level that changes this whole argument around it, throwing more care and more supervision is always going to be the solution because it minimises the risk that someone will litigate?
Right. So the worry of litigate. You know where I come from.
Yeah.
You know, you look at me cross-eyed, I sue you.
More and more here, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the depressing things. When the first time you came to Australia, there were no lawyer advertisements. Now there's lawyer advertisements everywhere. You know, personal injury law at its best. Like, oh, there's no such thing.
And we want to learn from your mistakes. So how do we do that?
Where do you start? I mean, let's think about it. I mean, the question is a great question, which is, how do you mitigate between risk and dignity of risk? That's the question. So the question and so we have a conversation. Now, I cannot tell you this is exactly how it works. So, let's think about this in many different ways. Whenever we're confronted with something that we know there's a guardian or there's a group of people that does not agree with this sort of framework, because there's, old school people who they won't say it this way, but what they really mean is, they're less, and our job is to protect them. Because the reason I lay awake, I've had people say, I lay awake at night thinking about what you're asking us to do with our people, and I think, when am I going to get sued? How am I going to get sued? And so the reality is, there's part number one, which is, how often does that happen? Not very, believe it or not. So what happens is we think the worst case scenario, so let's use data. You know the number of people who have sued people with intellectual disabilities because of something that they did that was of their choosing has actually happened in the last 5 years. It was actually my brother in that world. 5. How many people with intellectual disabilities are in the state of New York?
Yeah, but I'm more interested in the fact that, and I think it was maybe the gentleman from TAC or Jenny that mentioned it, that the direct relationship between the cost of attendant care or actually it might have been David. The cost of attendant care and the small proportion of this population that have behaviours of concern.
Sure.
We are spending fistfuls of dollars for no good reason.
Well, let's go back to it. So there's that level. But there's the other thing, which is, how are we defining risk?
Well, I think we're really bad at that.
Well, so there's the essential question. So when we started this neurobehavioral project in 1995, one of the things we had to go, and it was one of the jobs I had to go in front of the legislator and say, we're in the risk business, folks. And what we need to do is we need to, and I had some experience with federal courts and all that kind of stuff. So I knew a little bit about it. We get some lawyers involved and some legislative people involved, which is there's a dignity of risk. And that because you have a disability, you do not abrogate your rights under the Constitution of the United States. Having said that, we do have a responsibility if we are knowing, if we are aware that an individual under certain circumstances that can cause an imminent risk to self or others, then we have to do something. So we called it the good neighbor rule. The good neighbor rule is, what would I need to do to have this person live next door to me? And what can I do to make sure that I'm putting things in place so I didn't have to worry about my wife and kids if I'm gone? So that was one thing. We had to satisfy the people that we were both taking care of the risk to the person and the risk to the community. Once we got there, the next question became, well, how do you define risk? And then there's risk assessment and those kind of things. But the reality is it's a series of probabilities that we have to have conversations about, which is, somebody who cannot remember, somebody who's got serious memory impairments, that literally 5 minutes will be completely discombobulated. The risk of saying you can go get a prostitute is they can get down to their stairs and they have no idea where they are and where they're going. That would be a risk that would mitigate against us saying, go ahead. Having said that,
we forget why they wanted to go in the first place.
no, once you're horny, you don't forget. No, you got to take care of business.
There's a reminder there.
Yeah, it's always, for men, it's always there. Always. And we can have another Pigs conversation another time. But anyway. But the idea is, how are we demonstrating that we are mitigating risk in a reasonable way? So I'll go back to how you talk with families who are guardians. You keep having the conversation, and you involve the person in the conversation, saying, well, this is the life I want, this is what I'm trying to do, we can come up with a plan, what is our criteria?